The sterile white of the hospital room was supposed to symbolize a beginning, but for me it felt like the end. "He looks just like you, Alex," I said, a forced chuckle hiding my trembling voice. Nathan's and Melissa's eyes snapped to mine, a symphony of denial in their reaction. "Ridiculous, Laura. What are you saying?" Nathan's laugh was too sharp, too quick. Melissa just shook her head, avoiding my gaze. Our life had been simple before this. Nathan, Ava, and I in our cozy home, living what I thought was a happy existence. When Melissa, Nathan's sister-in-law, struggled to conceive, we all felt her pain. Her eventual pregnancy was a joy we all shared, or so I believed. Walking into the hospital that day, I expected to feel nothing but happiness. But Nathan's attention wasn't on his niece or nephew. It was fixated on Melissa in a way that clawed at my insides. "Melissa did great, didn't she?" he kept saying, his voice soft, tender even. It was a tone I hadn't heard in years, not since Ava was born. The drive home was silent. Nathan's mind seemed miles away, and I couldn't stop the gnawing feeling in my gut that something was deeply wrong. A few days later, Derek, Melissa's husband, came over. Our daughters played together as we sat, nursing our coffees. "Nathan's been a great support to Melissa," he started, his voice trailing off. "Yeah, he's been amazing," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Derek looked at me, his eyes searching. "Laura, do you think it's normal how close Nathan and Melissa have become?" I wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't. But fear, a constant companion these days, kept me silent. The next few weeks were a blur of Nathan's late nights and my growing suspicions. He was always texting, smiling at his phone in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. "It's just work, Laura. You know how it is." He'd dismiss my concerns, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. One evening I found lipstick on his collar, a shade I never wore. "It's nothing, a misunderstanding," Nathan said, his voice calm, too calm. But his eyes, they couldn't meet mine. I lay awake that night, listening to his steady breaths, feeling the chasm between us widen. The man I married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now. The thought of confronting him, of hearing him admit to an affair with Melissa, was too much to bear. So I chose silence. A silent witness to my own heartbreak. The days turned into weeks, each one heavier than the last. Nathan's visits to Melissa became more frequent, his excuses more flimsy. "She needs help with the baby," he'd say. But Ava had never needed him like that. Our daughter had grown up barely knowing her father's touch, his affection. It was all reserved for Melissa now. Derek and I started talking more, sharing our fears and doubts. "I think they're having an affair," he finally said one day, his voice heavy with resignation. The words hung in the air, a confirmation of my worst fears. "What do we do now?" I asked, feeling defeated, lost. "We need proof," Derek replied, determination in his voice. "For our peace of mind, for the sake of our families." So we decided to hire a detective to shine a light on the deceit that had crept into our lives. It was a step into the unknown, a final acknowledgement that the life I thought I had was nothing but a lie. As I lay in bed that night, Nathan's silent form beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how we got here. The love we shared, the dreams we built, how had it all come to this? The answer, I feared, was lying right beside me, hidden behind closed eyes and a facade of innocence. 2 weeks had passed since Derek and I made the decision to uncover the truth. Each day felt like a march through a minefield, each step threatening to blow up the facade of our lives. Derek came over with the detective's first report. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremor. "As I'll ever be," I replied, feeling anything but ready. We sat at the kitchen table, the sounds of our children playing outside a stark contrast to the tension between us. He opened the envelope, and we pored over the photos and texts. Nathan and Melissa at a cafe, their heads close together, laughing. Another photo showed them shopping, Nathan's hand lightly touching Melissa's back. The texts were even more damning, filled with endearments and plans to meet up when they knew Derek and I would be occupied. "I can't believe this," I whispered, the words like shards of glass in my throat. "How could they do this to us?" Derek's face was a mask of pain and anger. "We confront them, together." The confrontation was planned for the next evening at our house. The waiting was excruciating, time stretching out, each second heavy with dread and anger. Finally, they arrived. Nathan and Melissa, looking too comfortable in their deceit. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Derek wasted no time. "We know about the affair," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Melissa's face went white, while Nathan's expression hardened. "What affair?" Nathan's voice was cold, dismissive. "Don't play dumb, Nathan," I said, finding my voice. "We have proof." I threw the photos and texts on the coffee table in front of them. Melissa picked up one of the photos, her hands shaking. "It's not what it looks like," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really? Because it looks like you're betraying your family." Derek's voice rose, his anger palpable. Nathan stood up, his demeanor changing. "You're overreacting. We're just close, that's all." "Close?" I echoed, disbelief and anger coursing through me. "You call this being just close?" I pointed at a photo of them kissing. "It was a mistake," Melissa finally admitted, tears starting to form in her eyes. "A mistake?" Derek laughed bitterly. "How many times do you mistake your way into my wife's arms, Nathan?" Nathan was silent, his facade crumbling. "We're going to sort this out," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "You two need to decide where your loyalties lie, with each other or with your families." The room was silent, the only sound Melissa's quiet sobbing. Nathan looked at me, then at Derek, a mix of defiance and guilt in his eyes. "This isn't over," Derek said, standing up. "We'll be seeking legal advice." Nathan and Melissa left without another word, the gap between us now a chasm too wide to ever bridge again. After they left, Derek and I sat in silence, the weight of our discovery settling around us like a shroud. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice hollow. "Now, we rebuild. Without them," Derek replied, his voice firm but his eyes showing the pain of betrayal. We agreed to proceed with the divorces, a decision that felt like signing a death warrant to the life we thought we had. But there was no going back. The shadows of doubt had lifted, revealing the ugly truth beneath. As Derek left, he turned to me, a sad smile on his face. "We'll get through this, Laura, for our kids." I nodded, watching him walk away, feeling the solidarity between us. We were united in our betrayal, but also in our determination to rise from the ashes of our broken marriages. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but we were ready to face them. Together, we would seek our revenge, not through petty acts, but by reclaiming our lives and showing Nathan and Melissa that we were stronger than their deceit. The day of the confrontation had arrived. Derek and I had arranged to meet Nathan and Melissa at Derek's house, a neutral ground laden with memories of better days. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart beat out of your chest. Nathan and Melissa sat across from us, a gulf of betrayal between. Their faces were masks of apprehension, a stark contrast to Derek's steely resolve and my simmering anger. Derek didn't waste a moment. "We've seen the evidence. Now we want to hear it from you. What's been going on?" His voice was calm, but the underlying fury was palpable. Melissa glanced at Nathan, a silent plea for support. Nathan cleared his throat, his usual confidence nowhere in sight. "We didn't mean for this to happen," he began, his voice a mere shadow of its former self. "It just did." "Just did?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "You make it sound like an accident." "It was a mistake," Melissa interjected, her voice trembling. "We never meant to hurt anyone." "A mistake?" Derek's laughter was bitter, filled with scorn. "You call destroying our families a mistake?" Nathan looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Laura, Don't." I cut him off, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Don't you dare try to justify your actions to me." The room fell silent, the tension a tangible entity that wrapped around us, suffocating. Derek leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Nathan and Melissa. "We're done here. We've heard enough." "But what about us? What about our families?" Melissa's plea was met with a cold, hard truth from Derek. "There is no us anymore. You two made sure of that." His words were final, a door slamming shut on any hope of reconciliation. As Nathan and Melissa left, the reality of our situation sank in. The betrayal was out in the open, but it did little to ease the pain. If anything, it amplified it, each word from Nathan and Melissa a knife twisting deeper. Derek and I sat in silence, the aftermath of the confrontation settling around us like dust after a storm. "What now?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now we move forward," Derek replied, his voice firm. "We start the divorce proceedings, and we make sure they understand the gravity of what they've done." I nodded, the path ahead clear but daunting. This was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa had to face the consequences of their actions, not just in our broken hearts, but in their shattered realities. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork, a constant reminder of the betrayal. But amidst the chaos, a resolve solidified within me. Nathan and Melissa would not get away with tearing our families apart without facing the repercussions. Derek and I were in constant communication, our bond strengthened by our shared resolve for justice. "They won't know what hit them," Derek said during one of our strategy meetings. His determination was infectious, a beacon of strength in the overwhelming darkness. The day we filed for divorce was somber, yet there was an undercurrent of empowerment. We were taking control, no longer victims of Nathan and Melissa's selfish desires. As I signed the papers, my hands steady, I couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to reclaim my life, to show Nathan that he hadn't broken me. I was stronger than his betrayal, and I would emerge from this ordeal not just intact, but reborn. The battle lines were drawn, and this was just the beginning. Nathan and Melissa would soon learn that their actions had consequences, and Derek and I were just getting started. The legal battle was in full swing. Derek and I sat across from our respective lawyers in a conference room that felt too cold, too impersonal for the storm of emotions brewing inside me. We were about to discuss our strategy for the upcoming court sessions, a plan that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the full weight of their betrayal. "Our primary focus is on the financial repercussions and the custody arrangements," Derek's lawyer began, his voice all business. "We have a strong case, given the evidence of infidelity and the impact on your families." I nodded, my mind racing. The thought of Nathan and Melissa squirming in their seats, faced with the cold, hard facts of their actions, gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. Derek leaned in, his voice low but fierce. "We're not just going for a simple divorce settlement. We want to make sure they understand the pain they've caused, financially and emotionally." The lawyers outlined the strategy, including demands for alimony, child support, and even punitive damages for emotional distress. With each point they made, I felt a step closer to justice, a step closer to making Nathan and Melissa pay for the havoc they'd wreaked. As we wrapped up the meeting, my lawyer handed me a stack of documents. "These are the filings for the court. Once these are processed, it's only a matter of time." I took the documents, the weight of them in my hands symbolizing the gravity of the situation. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I want them to regret ever crossing us." The day of the first court session arrived. Nathan and Melissa were already seated when Derek and I walked in, their faces a mix of defiance and nervousness. As we took our seats, I caught Nathan's eye, his gaze quickly shifting away, unable to hold mine. The proceedings were a blur, the lawyers presenting the evidence, arguing our cases with clinical precision. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer tried to downplay the affair, painting it as a momentary lapse in judgment, but the evidence spoke louder than his words. During a recess, I stepped outside for air, the weight of the courtroom suffocating. Nathan followed, a desperate look on his face. "Laura, can't we talk about this?" "There has to be another way," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I turned to him, my resolve as strong as ever. "Talk? After everything you've done? You're delusional, Nathan." He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "You'll pay for what you've done, both financially and by losing us. You've already lost everything that mattered." Returning to the courtroom, I felt empowered, my path clear. Nathan and Melissa had chosen their fate the moment they betrayed our trust, and now they were facing the consequences. As the judge announced a recess until the next session, Derek and I shared a look of determination. This was far from over, but we were on the right track. Nathan and Melissa's lawyer seemed rattled, a sign that our strategy was working. Outside the courtroom, Derek and I discussed our next steps. "They think they can get away with a slap on the wrist. We'll show them how wrong they are," Derek said, anger lacing his voice. I nodded, the fire of revenge burning brighter within me. "They'll regret the day they decided to betray us. This is just the beginning." As we left the courthouse, the cold air felt invigorating, a stark contrast to the heated emotions inside. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for the fight. Nathan and Melissa would learn the hard way that actions have consequences, and Derek and I were the harbingers of their reckoning. The days leading up to the final court session were filled with a tense anticipation. Derek and I had become fixtures in each other's lives, our shared quest for justice, a bond that was unbreakable. We spent hours poring over documents and strategizing with our lawyers, determined to leave no stone unturned. On the eve of the final session, Derek called me. "Tomorrow's it, Laura. Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of nerves and determination. "We've got this. They won't know what hit them," he said, his confidence bolstering my spirits. The courtroom was packed the next day, a silent audience to the final act of our drama. Nathan and Melissa sat together, a united front that belied the cracks in their facade. As the session began, our lawyer presented our closing arguments with precision and unwavering conviction. He laid out the financial demands, the request for sole custody, and the punitive damages for the emotional toll their actions had taken on us. Nathan's lawyer attempted a rebuttal, arguing for leniency and a more equitable division of assets. My clients regret their actions, but they shouldn't be financially ruined because of a personal mistake. Derek leaned over to me, whispering, "A personal mistake? They call destroying families a mistake?" I couldn't help but scoff quietly, the absurdity of their defense clear as day. Then it was Melissa's turn to speak. She stood, her voice shaky. "I know we've caused pain, and I'm truly sorry for that. But please, think of the financial consequences. We have a child to think about." Her plea hung in the air, but my heart had hardened against their excuses. They thought of consequences only when faced with them, not when they embarked on their affair. Finally, Nathan stood. "I've made mistakes, but I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Don't let this mistake define our entire lives." The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, he announced he would deliver his decision. The wait was agonizing, each tick of the clock a reminder of what was at stake. When the judge returned, the room fell silent. He began to speak, his voice firm. "After careful consideration, the court has decided to grant the plaintiff's requests for alimony, child support, and partial punitive damages. The betrayal and its impact on the families cannot be overlooked." A gasp went through the room, Nathan and Melissa's faces turning pale. The judge continued, outlining the financial ramifications and the custody arrangements that favored Derek and me. As the judge concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, not just in words but in actions that would ensure Nathan and Melissa felt the consequences of their betrayal. Outside the courthouse, Derek and I shared a moment of quiet victory. "We did it," he said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did," I replied, the reality of our victory sinking in. They finally got what they deserved. As we parted ways, I felt a chapter of my life closing. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of me, but so would the strength I found in standing up for myself. Nathan and Melissa's downfall was a testament to karma's unyielding grip. They had chosen their path, and now they were forced to walk it, burdened by the financial and emotional weight of their choices. The drive home was reflective, a mix of sadness for what was lost and hope for what lay ahead. The battle was over, but the war for my own peace and happiness was just beginning. I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that justice, in the end, always finds a way. In the aftermath of the court's decision, the world seemed to shift on its axis. The victory was bittersweet, the taste of justice mingled with the remnants of a life unraveled. Yet, amidst the rubble of broken relationships and shattered trust, a new resolve took root within me. The first signs of Nathan and Melissa's unraveling came swiftly. Nathan, burdened by the financial obligations imposed by the court, reached out in a desperate attempt to renegotiate the terms. "I can't afford this, Laura. It's going to ruin me," he pleaded over the phone, his voice a mix of desperation and disbelief. "The court has made its decision, Nathan. You should have thought about the consequences before," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of the warmth it once held for him. "But what about Ava? What about our family?" His attempt to tug at my heartstrings fell flat, the mention of our daughter igniting a protective fierceness within me. "Our family was broken the moment you chose Melissa over us. You're facing the consequences of your actions now, I said, hanging up before he could respond. The finality in my voice marked the end of our conversation, and in many ways, the end of our connection. Melissa, too, faced her comeuppance. With Nathan's finances in disarray, she found herself grappling with the reality of raising their child without the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. Her complaints filled the air, reaching me through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances who still lingered on the fringes of my life. "It's not fair. This isn't the life I signed up for," she lamented to anyone who would listen, her voice tinged with bitterness and regret. The schadenfreude I felt was tempered by a hint of pity, not for Melissa, but for the innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult folly. Derek and I, through our shared ordeal, had grown closer, our conversations a blend of commiseration and burgeoning friendship. One evening, over coffee, he shared a piece of news that felt like the final nail in the coffin of Nathan and Melissa's deceit. "They're struggling to make ends meet. Melissa's been looking for work, and Nathan's second job barely covers the alimony and child support," Derek said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice that mirrored my own. "It's the bed they made. Now they have to lie in it," I responded, the sentiment echoing the harsh reality of their situation. Our dialogue was interrupted by Ava's laughter, a sound that brought home the reason for all our struggles. Derek's daughter, too, found joy in the simple moments we shared, her presence a balm to the wounds of the past. As the days turned into weeks, the tangible outcomes of our legal victory became evident. Nathan and Melissa's facade of unity crumbled under the weight of financial strain and public scrutiny. Their attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy were met with the cold, hard truth of their actions and the repercussions that followed. In the midst of their downfall, Derek and I found a semblance of peace. Our meetings, once dominated by strategies for legal battles, now gave way to conversations about healing and moving forward. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Derek mused one afternoon as we watched our children play in the park, their laughter a testament to their resilience. "We have," I agreed, allowing myself a moment to reflect on the journey. "And we'll keep moving forward, for them and for ourselves." The chapter of betrayal and revenge had closed, leaving behind lessons learned and strength gained. Nathan and Melissa's descent was a testament to the power of karma, a reminder that actions always have consequences. For Derek and I, the path ahead was clearer, paved with the promise of new beginnings and the determination to build a future defined not by the past, but by the possibilities that lay ahead.